I am Marwan Cameron. Yeah, guys, this is The Conduit. It is Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces. How was your Wednesday? Best hour of the week? Mark, how you doing there, sir?
I am awesome. And how are you, sir?
You know what? I can't complain. I'm blessed. I'm highly favored. Ready to rock. So I'm excited. Got Layla in the studio today, hanging out. So
With that awesome hair.
she does have some awesome hair. Layla, come in and show the audience your hair real quick.
All right.
That's the ham there. All right, thank you, darling. Appreciate that. So yeah, we got another good show for you today, for sure. So we're gonna get into it. Thank you, Rob. Glad that we are looking and sounding good. That's
5x5.
5x5. I like it. Maybe I should change the color to green in honor of Layla's hair today.
Yep.
Hey, BK, good to see you. Yep, she's Layla is styling and profiling for sure. So, we had a really good event last week. You like the hair? Well, I missed the purple, but daughter's choice. She gets to do what she wants there. I can only just kind of bat my eyes and give it a pouty lip. Say, can you do purple like at least twice a year? If I can at least get that, I'm okay. So we'll see. But we had a really good first pancake breakfast last week. Terry says nice hair. And we've got our upcoming event. So we'll make sure that I put the flyer up at the end. I'll be sending out an email also. And we kind of did our post-mortem on that. So if you want to check that out, definitely go back and look at that. I think we're on episode 14. Is that right, Mark?
14. Yes, it is. 13 was last week for the pancakes.
Oh, shared. Okay. Yeah. So what that is, let me just quickly talk about that. So right now we have a giveaway going on this week. So the Conduit giveaway, one entry for every live show is every time you share, you get a free entry. At the end of the week, we will select 2 winners and you'll win either a Best Buy card, an Amazon card, Starbucks card, or one of the Conduit candles that we're making. And just go ahead and type in the chat that you shared and hashtag done, which BK has done. So thank you for that. Still have a few days to do that and probably about 3 or 4 shows to go. So, every show that you share, you'll get another entry.
Yep.
So yeah, wait till you see our candle lineup here.
Yep. Can I put in a quick shout out here, Marwan?
Oh, of course.
Okay. A week from Saturday on the 16th is the South Sound Sustainability Expo in Tacoma. We will be there, and we will be hosting a booth, putting together a raffle prize. We're going to be doing a go bag kit for the raffle prize, and there is a scavenger hunt for the youth that we are also participating in. So come on down to Tacoma on Saturday next and join us at the South Sound Sustainability Expo. There'll be a lot of cool information there, a lot of good people. You get to see the efforts that people are doing to save our environment and to help us address climate change.
All right. That's awesome. When you get a chance, you'll type that in the chat. I'll put that information up for everyone too, Mark.
Okay.
But let's get into our topic of today. This is going to definitely be a good one. Cognitive dissonance.
If we don't talk to you about cognitive dissonance, who will? So did you want to put the definition up there and we can go from there?
Yep. Here's the definition here. And this is one that Mark selected. The state of having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, especially as relating to behavioral decisions and attitude change. BK says heavy. Yeah, this be a little heavy, right?
It is, but it affects our lives, and every one of us is affected by it. Everyone. So let's start doing a little bit of examples here. When we get into school, at least when I got into school, and back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, um, it was pretty obvious to me by the time I was in high school that they had an agenda for me that included going down these paths, doing these things, taking the career tests and everything else, that I was going to go to school and they were telling me what I was going to be, and I was going to follow this path, and I was going to get a degree, and then I was going to get a job, and everything was going to be hunky-dory, and that was my path to success in this country. How's that working for everybody?
Mm. Well, not great for everyone. For some people.
So there's Sir Kenneth Robinson, who is a professor and Knight of the Realm, and has a lot of YouTube videos, has written several books, says that we are in the course of having degree inflation.
Mm.
Used to be that you could get a high school degree, you could go into an apprenticeship program, you can get start working in the what they call the blue collar jobs, the trades, and you'd make really good money. You'd have a good career doing that. Then we started shoving people into college to get white collar jobs or pink collar jobs. I get confused about all the different colors of collars and what that has to do with actually working. But you go through, you get your MBA, you go out and sell things and everything else. But now you need to have a master's degree to do what 10, 15 years ago you'd get with a bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. Then soon you're going to have a PhD or multiple degrees to compete in the same thing. The problem is that the jobs don't exist, and people with degrees are now having huge debt and working at McDonald's. If you don't know this, read the newspapers because it's all over. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked for decades. Yet we still believe that if you follow that path, you will be successful.
I would submit to you that this has been going on longer than a lot of people recognized.
Absolutely.
I OC in the late 90s. And, at that time, I didn't graduate from high school. I went to the 9th grade.
Yep. Exactly, BK. She posted something. So
yeah, I'll put it up there. I got my GED 2 days after my 16th birthday. And so for me, I was very disillusioned when I finally stepped foot into a college at 24 of thinking, hey, if I get this associate degree, I'm on my way. And unfortunately, it wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. And I had to go and get a bachelor degree. And even then, it was like the job market still didn't look great. I wasn't very well networked at that time. And so I didn't do any internships. I didn't have any, relationships with businesses. And, in my circle, I didn't have, business owners and friends and family members that could, give me an entry point into a space of that nature. So I had to continue on to a master's degree. So I went from my bachelor's straight into a master's, and then I went to work. And so the goalpost has been moving for, a few decades now. And so I don't know who you were quoting, but this has been a problem for a minute. And then we've got far
Sir
away.
Kenneth Robinson was who I was quoting, and he basically has been saying for a long time. He didn't go in his presentation. He didn't go into a lot of detail, but he said that we've had degree inflation for quite a long time. I'd say 40 years that I know of, and possibly longer.
Just as a side, what is your thought on if there's a push to make education free, right? At least associate degree, at the minimum, maybe even the bachelor degree. My thought is the associate degree is now the high school diploma, and the bachelor degree is now the associate degree. Do you think that would be the end result, and they're just going to push it up, or do you think something else?
How much time do we have? I think that we need to re-examine the entire compulsory education system. For anybody who's interested, I strongly suggest you read John Taylor Gatto, Gatto, and his book, The Underground History of American Education.
Mm-hmm.
Our education system, God, I'm going to get a lot of slam for this. It's essentially a shell game. and it has been since since we put it in place in the early 1900s. It was funded by industrialists to create workers, and the goal is to create people who don't ask questions and have just enough knowledge to do what is needed to do in the factory. And then there was the private education for those other more affluent folks to train the managers and such. And there's a movie by Fritz Lang from 1926 called Metropolis, which I think is a brilliant example of a capsule that shows where this was heading. The problem is that the people who are teaching the private schools now are the same people that went through the public education schools and had been taught the same system. So the private schools is kind of a myth too. They're not getting any better than anybody else is because the teachers teaching them are the same teachers teaching us and that have gone through our education system. So it's all kind of a shell game with moving targets to support privatized schools and fund education. I think we need to look at education differently and go back to teaching people about history, not about facts about history. We teach people to take a test in a way that people will forget all of the data minutes after the test is done. We need to go back to teaching people history, teaching them math in a practical way that is meaningful. I don't know about you, Marwan, but when they started teaching me theoretical math in high school, I was going, what the hell am I going to use this for? I'm not planning to go into engineering.
I didn't go to high school, sir. I couldn't tell you.
Okay. So, they were teaching me stuff and I'm going, I'm not ever going to use this anywhere in my life. So why am I learning this? I mean, because to go to college and to learn it in college. And then I was in college and I was 3 years into college and I said, so far I haven't learned anything that I didn't know in high school. The people teaching me have never actually done any of it. They're just educated to teach it. And I'm feeling like I'm paying money for things that I'm not actually getting.
Well, I got to stick up as being
I left college.
Myself, and I taught at the college level and I taught math, business math. Math for
business
me.
Math is math. It's real math. I mean, it's math that that's usable.
With that, I think the other math has its place also, and in that everything isn't necessarily direct, right? You're learning geometry, but what you're learning is problem solving, critical thinking skills. Though that's what math is a big thing that is designed to do. So I'm a proponent of that. I won't say all education is bad. That's my opinion. You're forming yours, but I just wanted to push back a little on that as a former.
I don't disagree that math is important and it teaches you critical thinking, but how we teach math, in my experience, is not a way to retain it or to use
it. I'm sorry. BK says business math came from Satan. Hey, business math is awesome. Percent cost on your margin and all that good stuff. Oh yeah, I love it. That's good
anyway,
stuff.
So I think we need to revamp the entire system and rethink how we teach.
Well, Mark, let me ask you this. You're saying that the education system is, designed, it's working just as it was designed, right?
Exactly.
One, we're not in an agrarian society right now. Probably should have school all year long. I've been a big, proponent of that. School should probably be longer in the day, especially since parents don't get out of work typically until 5:30, but their kids are getting out 2 hours earlier. So that's creating issues. And then, school education was designed to breed workers, right? And not entrepreneurs. But all of that being said, there is still a segment of the population that thrives through an educational system, even if it's not the public educational system as you're kind of laying out there. So what are they getting that everyone else isn't?
They're better at following the rules. I don't know. I keep hearing that there are people that thrive in the system. I knew very few of them, and I am probably not. Yeah, actually, I agree with Rob. I use geometry a lot. It was the trigonometry that I was like going, what am I going to do with this stuff? But the school system, my high school was an experimental high school in the 60s and 70s in California. And we actually were taught differently than they're taught today. And we learned about history and the juiciness of history as opposed to facts and figures about history. So, but I watched both my nephew and my daughter go through, and I'm like, what are you getting out of this? I mean, it's gotten so much worse every decade. We're putting more and more money in, and kids are getting less and less education. And now they're taking all of the creative focus things out because they're unimportant. And I would argue with you that music will teach people math and creative thinking as well as math would.
Mm-hmm.
Because music's all about counting.
I think music, sports, all of those things are important for childhood development for sure.
And yet we keep cutting those out of the budget more and more and more. That's why organizations like Playing for Change are around. They provide resources for children to learn music.
So again,
playing.
Question for you, Mark. Again, there's still a segment of the population that thrives off education, right? So what is it that they're learning that the regular person, the regular United States citizen is not getting?
They're better at following the system, at following the rules. They need to follow a doctrine would be my. But I'd also say that we need to take a look at those kids, that portion of the populace 10 years down the line and see where they're at and what they're doing. They succeeded in school. Where are they at 10 years later?
Well, I guess who I'm talking about are more your Ivy League folks, right? The people that, end up interning for Congress people and go into, public office, or, folks that go through.
They didn't go through public school.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. So there is education that is still happening that is working for a population. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that it's necessarily public school, but what is the difference? What are they getting that the regular folks aren't getting?
Connections, relationships. They're thriving because they're building relationships. They're making the connections that are going to put them through life. They're not coming out of there smarter than anybody else. They're coming out with better connections than other people are, with more resources, more available tools to them to succeed.
So based on that logic, then you're saying the education is pretty much similar. If we could build connection better, then the regular person would thrive better.
Yes.
So then
also, if they were taught in a way that connected the dots for them.
Okay.
Learning facts and figures that aren't connected to anything else is not a way to learn. It's a way to read and remember. You have to tie things to other pieces. And cognitive dissonance is believing that our system works when a small group of people who have more resources than the rest of us thrive in the system because they're able to move into another system that gives them more cachet into the world, is not a measure for how well everybody does.
Well, let's get into
if the system's failing 80% of us, the system's broken.
Mm-hmm. So let's get into it. I do like BK's her term there, the mental discomfort that results from holding two conflicting beliefs, values, or attitudes. First, let me get on that.
I love that one. And so you put that up while I love talking to people who say these products are killing us. They're poison. But Tide's okay because I use it. and therefore I feel good about Tide, even though it's as poison as all the rest of them are. And that's, we are able to hold two mutually exclusive thoughts as both true at the same time. I always find that fascinating. I'm guilty of it too, by the way. I'm not pointing fingers at people and say, you have this problem. No, everybody has the same problem. By virtue of us using it and liking it, it must be okay. even though all the information says otherwise.
Hmm. So we'll get into kind of solutions and how to combat that. Um,
Well,
but
you're not going to get change that we need, the global change that we need, or even regional or neighborhood change that we need, if you run up against someone's cognitive dissonance. You just aren't. So we have to find solutions to go around it.
Well, here's the thing. I think, again, the premise of Roseco, which is bringing puzzle pieces together, is really what can help with that.
Yeah.
And just looking at it from BK's definition here of mental discomfort that results from holding two conflicting beliefs and values and attitudes, if those things are going to change, you're going to have conversations with other people that have competing or slightly divergent beliefs or values and attitudes, and have those conversations and move that discomfort and give them a space to change, right?
Yes.
Because what's happening now, and if we look politically, the right says this, the left says that, and everyone is just going to retreat into their corners. There's no space to say, okay, this is your opinion. Let me actually analyze that, and see if you know what, I don't necessarily agree with that piece of it, but I see what you're saying there, and actually feel the same way there. I think there's synergy and opportunity there in the middle.
Absolutely.
We
But think about our language. Think about the language you use. I mean, I have a very good friend who has a Facebook group that's international called Fight Climate Change,
Mhm.
and we all of our words about change are about conflict. We're fighting, we're defeating, all of this about conflict. We don't use words of cooperation and coordination and collaboration. We use words of conflict. And how do you think cognitive dissonance is addressed with conflictive words and conflictive attitude? Are you going to change somebody's mind by telling them they need to change because they're wrong?
Yeah,
Or
no.
are you going to change somebody's mind by sitting down with them and saying, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing this? Let's look what that might look like. Let's imagine for a few minutes. Let's talk." By the way, I've got a barbecue set up. Why don't you come over and we'll talk, and I'll give you some ribs and some beans and some potato salad while we're talking.
Right, but are you trying to get them to see your viewpoint, or are you also trying to listen and learn from their viewpoint?
Absolutely listening and learning from their viewpoint, because you can't communicate until you do.
Mhm. Because I think oftentimes when that happens, and there is an invitation that's extended, it's like, hey, okay, you're here. Now let me tell you why
How it
I think
is.
that way is right, right?
Yeah. And that's conflictive.
Hmm.
I mean, you're already putting them on the defensive, and you're coming in saying you're right. And God knows I don't know enough about everything to be right. All I know is that I think that there's a better way to do things. So let's talk about it. And maybe you're already doing it and I just don't know. So tell me your story.
I think another huge issue also is the fact that sometimes what we'll do is we'll look at a series of thoughts and beliefs, right? And say, okay, we can have this conversation about racism, let's say, right? But I am hard fixed on abortion. So because you feel the opposite way, we can have a conversation about racism. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Just as an example of holding two things up. And I think that gets in our way also, where we don't leave ourselves any space to try to agree on even anything at this point. We've gone down this road so far. So how do we
It
reverse that and come back?
well, we have to look in the mirror first.
Mhm.
We have to understand that most of us come from a scarcity place. We're all a little afraid. I mean, when over half the country is one paycheck away from homelessness or poverty, we are all scarce, and we have been taught for whatever reasons not to share that with each other and just to hide it because it's shameful. It's a stigma. I think you were talking about stigma earlier. Um, we need to look at the fact that we all have cognitive dissonance. We will find it, and we just need to understand it. If you want to build a relationship with somebody else, and you want to start collaboration and do that, you need to figure out how to listen. You need to hear somebody else's story, but you actually have to know what your story is.
But here's the deal: why do I even want to build a relationship with someone that doesn't agree with me?
Do they not agree with you on everything?
Doesn't matter. Whatever the topic is that exists, you don't agree with me on that. I'm very staunch in my position in that. So why do I even want to talk to this person? You don't agree with me. I just need to work with the people who do agree.
Then go talk to the next person until you find somebody who can have that conversation. But most people want to tell their story. One of the things I try very hard to do is not give my personal history or too much about what I believe and what I don't believe. Because whenever I start doing that, people immediately go, well, you believe this, so I'm not going to deal with you. But, I'm just quietly sitting there going, well, let's talk about what you believe. Let's tell me your story. This isn't about me. This is about your time to tell me your story.
Right. But so what you're saying is we need to be intentional if we're going to change the situation.
Absolutely. We have to be intentional about being able to listen to somebody else and try your hardest not to be judgmental about it.
There's quite a vulnerability in that, right?
Because
you can go to the story and there's people that are like, tell your story walking because I don't want to hear it. But you're trying.
Yeah. And, we have to learn those lessons if we're ever going to come back together into community. And I will tell you from my personal experience that whenever I write the word community into one of my posts or lines, I get 10 times the people looking at it because people crave community. But we are not taught how to have community. We are taught how not to have community.
Well, all right, you just said a perfect thing. Okay, so how do you overcome the cognitive dissonance for the people that when you post community, you get more reaction to it, but getting them to move beyond to the next step, right? So they want community, but they're not working toward community. That there it is in a nutshell.
Yeah.
What's the?
But they go to church for community. But let's ask this question. This is going to be an unpopular one too. Does church really give you community?
Well, you're answering a question with a question.
Yeah. We are offered lots of things to supplant community that appear easier than community because of all the things we just discussed. The need to talk to somebody else, the fear of being judged, the fear of hearing something from them that you don't agree with, that you can't get past. That's work. That's hard work. That's and our basic indoctrination of combative language. Why would I want to talk to you if you don't agree with me? Well, maybe you're right and I'm wrong, but how hard is it to get to that point where I'm willing to listen and take in new information because I need to learn whether I'm correct or I'm not correct. We're taught not to even ask that question ever.
Well, why do I need to learn if I'm correct? I already believe I'm correct, so I don't need to have that reinforced by someone who doesn't.
So now we're back to, and this is what we talked about before the show. We talked back to tipping points. Some people are never going to be able to have that conversation. There are just some people that won't. They're so locked in and so afraid that they have to keep themselves in a very, very, very small box and not expand it. But the majority of people out there really are more questioning and wanting to know more. And you have to keep talking to people until you find those folks. And you sit down and then you can build a community. And even the people who don't want to have a conversation with you about that, there are things you can talk to them about that they will agree with. Like food on the table, making sure your family's safe. Well, I'm doing a great job of that. There's that, all of that, but they're listening, even though they're saying they don't. They're listening because, as we've talked before, food security is a real thing. And you just went to the store recently for the pancake breakfast and saw that the prices are going up. We talked about, you mentioned that millions of chickens are dying across the country, chances of egg prices going up. I told you the story about price changes in the marketplace, and people are dumping food and letting it rot at the borders, and truckloads and truckloads, millions of tons of food are dumped because of port disputes, price changes, because it's a commodity. And yet we have thousands of people starving. We have millions and millions of people on the SNAP benefits. We have, food insecurity everywhere in this country, and yet we're dumping food. And prices in the marketplace are going up and up and up, and we have no control over it. So the only place that we can get control is if we start working together, maybe build a community garden. There's something we might be able to agree on without going into politics or abortion or race or religion or any of the other things. A
Well,
basic value.
there's the conflict. But you know what I think is what you're saying is what's needed are community ambassadors, right?
Yeah,
And and you have to decide if you want to change, if you want to find that space where people can start to come together. What it's going to take is intentionally becoming a community ambassador and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go out. I'm going to have these hard conversations. I'm going to be vulnerable. I know I'm not going to have conversations or stimulate a conversation with certain people, but I'm willing to do that in order to build the community." Right?
yep,
Uh, I think is what we're doing here is as
yes.
community ambassadors. When we
Well,
talk,
actually, that's what I'm doing. You're being a devil's advocate and causing me a pain in my hook.
all right, I got my horns up. But that's it though, right? That's what conversation is going to look like. It's how you
Yeah,
perceive the world, how I perceive the world, and we have a conversation, and then we find where those things gel. And so I have to ask questions. I'm sure the audience probably has questions also that are similar
absolutely.
or different, or they're like, yeah, right on, Mark. And so you're going to have everyone all over the spectrum. And so that's why we have that dialogue, right? I think people benefit
Absolutely.
in the dialogue in person, coming from the dining room table, coming from the barber shop or other spaces, coming from the church or wherever it is, at the gym, wherever those things are, the spa, and saying, okay, so this is what this dialogue looks like when other sides actually talk together and don't think the same, but ultimately want the same thing, but they're calling it maybe something different, or they prioritize those things differently, right? You're prioritizing food, I'm prioritizing housing, and it's like, well, mine is more important than yours. Well, how can we, address both of these things simultaneously? um
But until we talk, you don't know that I think they're equally important.
right, but you're going to advocate for food and I'm going to advocate for housing, so while you're saying they're equally important, your attention and time is going to go
Because I
toward
cook.
food. Right, well, I build houses, so you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
But
No,
that
no.
you
It,
can exist, right?
yeah, we can coexist, and we can both work on our personal passions, and everyone benefits. Problem with that?
What if new construction for single family units or even multi-family units had gardens built into the architecture?
I think
I
that
don't,
that's the way that we need to go.
but that just popped into my head just from having this conversation. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I think that's the power of having these conversations and more
Yeah, I
people.
think I think there are a lot more people that garden out there than you know than you realize are out there, and I think communities, intentional communities, are growing too. A lot of people I'm talking to are all about wanting to have an intentional community where people can treat each other fairly, where there's a communal cooking and eating space, where people can share food, where there's community gardens that everybody has some responsibility for. I think that there's huge movements, and we're reaching a tipping point for that, but our structure, our infrastructure, hasn't caught up with it yet. And as I say, I live in a place where we have lots and lots of greenbelt, and there's some discussions going on around here. How can we engage the people that run the property to allow for some of those green belts to be turned into gardens? I live pretty close to Blueberry, which is a thriving community garden that there's literally no spaces ever available in because people grow there every year. And I think we need to have more and more of that because food security is going to become a really huge thing. And
Why so?
housing, and I will tell you why housing is not on the top of my list. It's not that I
Mhm.
don't think it's important. It's just that I can't wrap my head around how to fix it. Which is why I think other people coming to the table with that piece of the puzzle is vitally important. I just don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to fix it when the county and the city governments, the state government, or the county and city certainly depend on development to create the revenue that there's a shortfall from what they used to get from the state and federal government. So when they're looking at having to meet the needs of the people and development is the only reliable way for them to get it, how is it that we're going to be able to fix the situation and create more affordable housing as opposed to what's going on in Seattle, where people who work in Seattle can't afford to live there? They commute 2 hours. When I was in San Jose, same thing. People were moving out to Livermore and Tracy and taking BART in, which they have BART, so they were commuting 2 hours each way every day to get home because no one could afford to live in Silicon Valley.
Well, I argue that there are people living in Kitsap County that can't afford to live here either.
Exactly. And if development continues, no one will be able to afford to live in Kitsap County.
Mhm.
That's the end result of this model. So I think housing is vitally important. And if I could figure out in my head a way to solve that problem, it would be on top of it and pushing everywhere to get it. But I don't have an answer for that. That's why it's a jigsaw puzzle, and everybody needs to bring their pieces because someone's going to bring some pieces, and we're going to see a path we can address.
Well, and I think that's fair, right? People are going to have their area of expertise or interest, and that's what
Or a
they
question,
bring.
yeah,
You're
or
bringing,
a
yeah,
question or way of looking at it, yeah.
so you're bringing food. I bring housing, transportation, other things of that nature. I think of like the new Pendleton place that KMH has built with a lot of help. I think with Bremerton Housing Authority and the county and other folks, where they will have. I believe they're going to have access to medical um, and mental health services, right? So that's going to be built in, and so thinking about homelessness in a different way, where it's like, hey, housing first, let's just get them sheltered. But there needs to be programming in place to restore a person if they can be restored, right? There's going to be a certain, percentage of the population that just can't work for whatever reason, but they need housing too. But for those that can, to restore them to a place where they can be self-sufficient and thrive in this ecosystem that most people aren't thriving in anyway. So, but
Right.
those are the differences that we're talking about, right? And so, if I can, I'd like to go back to the solution. I love the community ambassador. Let me read what BK is saying. She says, "I pay 1,500 a month for a one-bedroom apartment in Port Orchard. One income can pay my bills, but not much money left after the rest of the month. Gas, fuel, hygiene items, etc." I mean,
Yep.
that's absolutely facts, right? So it's like it's not even Seattle. It's like, hey, I can't afford to live here, and the rent is just going to continue to increase. And as soon as, unfortunately, we have Bremerton Housing Authority and KCR coming on at 3, uh, once the eviction assistance money runs out, you're going to see an explosion of evictions. Where are these folks going to go? What's the next step for them, right? Because it is so high. And then when your rent's bad, your credit rating is bad, your rental history is bad. When food is up, when gas is up, I mean, what are you going to be able to do? And BK is saying she's looked for other housing options to no avail. Absolutely. So I think, we're also in an election year. So I think, this year, toward the end of this year, all of 23 is going to be wicked on a lot more people than it already has been.
And it's going to get much worse because, as Nick likes to say, systems support systems, and it's true on every front. If you're struggling now, a change in gas prices like we just had, a change in food prices like we're having and continuing to have, all of that creates more failure within the system.
So to go back to what I was saying, with
Mhm.
the community ambassador, I think it's going to take the intentionality of some of us that are willing to put ourselves out there and say, "Hey, come on, let's have this conversation. Let's talk. Let's find out what your interests are, and find ways to work together to solve some of these issues." I mean, we are a very individualistic society. We're not very collective, but that's what it's going to take. And a lot of us are very isolated, right?
I
I li-
I don't know, Marwan. I'm really uncomfortable with that idea of putting out there and talking about community. I mean, what if I run into somebody who doesn't like me? I
well,
mean,
I mean,
yeah, I mean, what's the important of? And I'm putting your shoe on your foot. What's the important of having community? Why should I struggle to have community? Why would it be important to me?
well, I tell folks that the bad answer is I would tell my students, they would tell me, C's get degrees and why should I this and that. And I say, well, you know what? I really love McDonald's French fries and they always need really good cooks. And sometimes I like them with no salt on them. So, you know, it's like change or perish, right? It's
Mhm.
like Noah's Ark. Noah's building the ark, and folks are like, okay, um, you, you can't save everyone, but it
Nope.
doesn't mean you don't make the effort. And so for me, I've dedicated my life to making the effort to try to save as many folks as possible, or at least to help them, right? And in that way, being a community ambassador, um, the individualistic nature that we have, well, maybe we need to carpool, right? It's just something that we don't do. We have to think about how we're going to start saving cost. How can we maybe share food expenses? Um, we can buy in bulk and cook in bulk. I'll cook a larger meal because it's cheaper and I can feed two or three families. And then the next night, that family cooks, right? So there's things that can happen. It's just those ideas are going to come from us coming together and having these conversations and thinking about those ways.
And I was driving for Marwan last night, and for his organization, Gather Together, Grow Together, and they provide rides for people. And a couple days a week, I drive for them. And I was having a conversation with someone I picked up, and I floated the idea of he had mentioned a truck that was for sale as we were driving by. I said, I kind of have this theory that communities, neighborhoods should come together to buy a truck because what do you need a truck for most of the time? It it's a huge gas hog. You don't need the power or the room of a truck if you're driving commuting. So I personally think communities should come together and get a truck and then share the truck and use it for moving and for all the other things that you use a truck for, and not have everybody own a truck. I mean, it's a huge burden for somebody to spend $40,000 for a vehicle that is so inefficient most of the time. And he went, "That is such a good idea. I never thought of that before." I mean, how often do you really need a truck? You need one every now and again, but not always.
Right. Well, maybe that's something that neighborhoods can do, and they have the infrastructure for it, right? Like through HOAs and things of that
Hmm.
nature. They can say, "Hey, we're going to do this. This is a communal need. We're going to do a community garden here on this street, or however they're going to do it." And so the blueprint does exist, but that's where those ideas can come from. And then
Absolutely.
and if that doesn't work, we'll try something else.
Yeah, and it's just like, and I don't like to float the idea of going back to what we were before because We really have to move forward. But a lot of the things that we've left behind are way more valuable than we've treated them. And part of the communal living or understanding that your neighbors and working with your neighbors is the skill sets we've lost by working together. Your neighbors all have different skills. Like Marwan is focused on building because he has that. I've cooked most of my life, so food is a big thing for me. Both of us come together and we do a lot more because we bring two very different perspectives and skill sets in every neighborhood that exists.
Well, we are doing our first what is that called? The neighborhood potluck?
Yeah, we're working on setting up the first neighborhood potluck,
That's-
and we're working on office geek here. Okay, and we're working on. I've been kind of straining trying to figure out how we can bring together a fund source so that we can do barbecues for each of the ones that come to the table. Young lady of your acquaintance, Haley, was saying that she would like to bring her neighborhood together and
okay.
do one. So I know you're planning one. We're already working on one here. A lot of people are really interested in it, but it's kind of in years of my bailiwick now to put together the barbecue and possibly get some volunteer musicians to come out and play music and make it a real block party.
So I know we're looking at probably the end of May for the first one,
Yeah,
or somewhere in
yeah,
there. And I think we're doing my neighborhood first. We'll definitely let you know when that's going to be, and you're definitely
yep,
invited to be part of the neighborhood to come out. So we'll make sure there's big fanfare in there. But Mark, if I can ask you,
sure.
um, can you start thinking of um, how to how do I start to speak to my neighbors, finding out, you know, what their knowledge, skills, and abilities are, what their potential level of engagement is, what their unmet needs are, what their concerns are, in the most benign way, to not chase them off, knowing that
Not
every
not invasively.
yeah, every neighbor's not going to even come out, right? I don't want your food. I'm going to draw the curtains when people are out here, get off my lawn. So we
Yeah,
understand it's going to be a segment. But for those that are like, I'm a little interested, but I don't know, I just, we need a way as community ambassadors, we need a toolkit on how to go out and pull and draw people unto us and have those conversations and break that ice, because it is difficult, right? It's stranger danger. So I think that'd be really powerful if you could work on those things. That would be
actually,
fantastic,
that's what the workshops were designed to do.
right? Well, we're not doing a workshop now. I'm saying, we got
Yeah.
a month and a half before this thing tips off. So
Well, the thing is to start the conversation and to facilitate talking about the benefits. Really, the focus is going to be on the benefits. What is the strength? You start from the point of everyone in the neighborhood is at risk in one way or another, and there's really no way they can't be. The point is to get them to feel comfortable in a safe space where they can admit it and talk to each other.
how do you keep it equitable? Because sometimes what happens is, I know that I'm very given, right? I'll give the shirt off
Mhm.
my back, but at the same time, I will give until I'm beyond depleted. And so a lot of people have been in that space, and it's like, look, I don't mind chipping in and helping a little bit, but every time I get involved in something, then everyone's looking at me and I'm doing the lion's share of it. It's like we got a group work in school, and that two people in the group aren't doing any work, but your grade is contingent on it. And it's like, you know what? I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm growing my garden. I can keep myself safe. I wish you all the best, but everyone's not gonna pull their weight here. So, how do we, again, get folks
Twenty
to it?
percent are always 20% are always going to do the most of the work, but you can peer pressure people into doing it without being aggressive.
I don't want to peer pressure people into to doing
You,
them.
it's by being out and being obvious about what you're doing. It's not about telling them that, come on, guys, you need to be out here. It's about being obvious and having fun with it. You know, remember the story, the Huck Finn or Huckleberry Finn
Mm.
and painting the fence? They were having so much fun painting the fence that people started paying him to paint the fence.
No, no, remind me. Huck Finn
Okay, okay. Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. There was a scene in there.
is cool.
If I remember, it's been years since I've read it, but it was one of my favorite things. Is his aunt made him paint the fence around the house, whitewash the fence around the house, and he started making it seem like it was so much fun that his friends came over and they all wanted to paint the fence. And at some point, they started paying him so that they could paint the fence for him because it was so much fun. And it's the same type of thing. You got to learn how to make it appear, or make it fun, or and attract people to become part of it because it's fun.
Well, I
We
mean,
don't think of we don't think of things as fun.
sometimes fun is work, but
Yeah.
but the question is just to that's why I don't engage with some organizations, right? Because you come in and it's like, oh, you're here. You can do this and this and this and this, and it's like I I I came to get fed from being in this space, and now I'm being tasked to do all these things. So that's tough. Attraction rather than promotion. I like that.
Yep. Make it fun and have a blast doing it. It's one of the reasons why I want to do the block parties. Is you bring food, you bring music, and you just make it infectious.
Well, maybe not infectious since we're still dealing with a pandemic. Different word.
All right. Um, yeah, just make it. I mean, bring yourself and bring fun to it. It's really about how you come to it, and other people will be attracted to be there.
Absolutely.
You're
Absolutely.
looking forward to having your block party, aren't you?
Yeah, I am actually. I'm looking forward to getting to know I'll come anything that's offered. It'll probably be free food.
Okay.
Um but that's a concern of mine, right? Because culturally, I grew up where we didn't talk to our neighbors, right? We said hi, and in passing or whatever, like if something happened, we'd have a conversation. But other than that, you're not coming to my house borrowing sugar, or you're not coming into my house. I'm not coming to your house. And that's really how it was. Matter of fact, even now, like I keep my curtains drawn. I was raised, my dad would open up the curtains, but um, you just didn't. It's just how we grew up, right?
Yep.
We were latchkey kids, so don't answer the phone, don't let anyone in. So that's how I was raised, and that's kind of how I am. I am out always giving, and I'm actually an introvert. So when I'm actually at home and it's my downtime, the last thing I want to hear is when someone's knocking on my door because they want or need something.
Yeah.
It's like
You know,
hitting.
I am also introverted, though most people don't understand that about me. I need the time to recharge when I'm not around people. Um, but all my life, I mean,
Need you. Go
it
ahead.
drove my it drove my sister crazy, my older sister crazy. We would go to Disneyland. I grew up in for those of you who don't know, I grew up in Southern California, and when you grow up next door to Disneyland, it's kind of like you always just go. And it was before it was so bleeding expensive as it is now. Um, but I would go to Disneyland. We would stand in the long lines, and I would just chat with people from all over the country. I'd just like, oh, what's going on? And I'd listen to their stories. I'd be interested in what they're doing. Drove my sister crazy. She'd like pull me and says, "Mark, why are you talking to these people?" I said, because it's interesting, and we're standing in line for 2 hours. What do we want to ignore everybody around us? And when I had some awesome conversations with people from everywhere, learned all kinds of things about people from India, China, Japan, England, South Africa, just talking to them while they were waiting in line at Disneyland. And to me, I mean, later on I'd be exhausted, but it's so much fun to hear people's stories. It's so much fun to learn about them. Actually, I'm on an online community, and one of my joys is working with this girl named Emily, who's from Perth, Australia. She's 22 or 23 now, I guess. And I find it interesting in the community that are mostly in the 30 to 60 age range. Most of them have never heard of Casablanca, the movie with Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman.
I've never seen
Most
it.
of Yeah, I mean, they've never heard of it. They don't know anything about it. I mean, they have no sense of a lot of classic movies, a lot of classic books. They don't know. M knows all of them. She says, "Yeah, my father made me watch them when I was them." So it's like she'll quote things from the movie, and I find myself laughing because here's this 22, 23-year-old girl from Perth, Australia, who has more knowledge of movies and music from the 40s and 50s than most of the people in the group that grew up with it,
Mm.
which I find fascinating.
Maybe they didn't grow up with it.
Yeah, I mean, it was around when they were around, so you kind of wonder. But it's like classic rock. People don't know. They listen to classic rock, but they don't know a lot of things about it, even though
Okay.
the music was available and around them.
Tar?
What?
Pat Benatar?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
You know she was operatically trained.
No. Uh. I
Yeah.
just when any song comes on, I say it's Pat Benatar. It's a inside joke. With, I don't know who the artist stars. Like, is that Pat Benatar? Like, no, it's not
Hey,
Pat
I,
Benatar.
I'm gonna give a quick shout out to another YouTube group called Andy and Alex. They're a couple of 20 somethings college students. Both of them are in bands. I don't know if they're in a band together, but they listen to music from the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, and it's so much fun to find out that they've never heard some of these songs before that are so much ingrained in my life, and listen to what their reactions are. Matter of fact, the other day they listened to Paul Simon's "50 Ways to Leave Your Lover," and not one of my favorite songs. Huh? You don't know? I can't hear you, Marwan.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but continue.
Okay, so Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel wrote a song called "50 Ways to Leave Your Lover," and it's huh?
It's like that explains it.
Yeah, no, but not one of my favorite songs, but they break it down musically, and it's really interesting.
Mm.
I mean, and I don't know what music you grew up with. Um, for me, I mean, I walked into a class in junior high school. There was a music appreciation class, and the teacher played Steppenwolf's "Born to Be," and then followed by Simon and Garfunkel's "Sound of Silence." And they are both considered, but they are so
Exactly.
wildly divergent that it's like, wow, must be Pat Benatar. Yeah. Um, yeah. Another thing I'm big on is music. So
But to answer your question, so my dad was Reverend Winthrop Cameron, so worldly music wasn't allowed in the house. So I didn't grow up with really any music, right? Even culturally for me, we had very few worldly albums. Matter of fact, I think I had one of my older brothers brought in some rap tape. This is back during the cassette tape days, folks. And he pulled it all out and threw it out into the sidewalk. So, uh, yeah, yes, gospel for sure. And he played the organ. He was a musician for the church. So that was our music growing up until later generations of Camerons when he eased up and allowed us to listen to some music. So yeah, I just wasn't exposed in that way.
got it. Yeah, for me, the very first to give a kind of a dichotomy here, and we're actually at our time. Quickly, the very first two cassette tapes I ever owned were Creedence Clearwater Revival and The Fifth Dimension. So again, even the very first two music tapes that I ever owned were wildly divergent in their approach to things.
And you know what? I probably have heard music from both, but I'd have to hear the song. You know,
Right.
like folks can cite albums like, "Oh, this album is great because this and that." It's like if you play the song for me, it's like, "Oh yeah, I've heard that. That's a good song. I like that."
Yeah.
Really get into rock until Rock Band came out. So we were really big on Rock Band. It was like, "Oh, this music is awesome." and it was like all
Yeah.
with DLC content, and we almost owned everything on Rock Band. But yeah, I mean, there's just domestication is how you're raised. But we are out of time. You know,
We
sometimes
are.
we are at a doctor's office. Like, okay, that's our time for today.
And we should. You're very welcome, BK. We should end the program with Bachman Turner Overdrive's "Taking Care of Business."
Well, we could, but then we would lose the whole broadcast because it's on Facebook, YouTube.
Yeah, they would demonetize us. Shout out to BTO, okay? Just we're not playing you. Shout out to you. We are taking care of business.
They would just demonetize. They would just cut it off. So, but again, don't forget about the giveaway. One entry for everyone. Share the live show till Friday. Win that Best Buy card, Amazon, Starbucks card, or the Conduit candle. Just type done in the chat. Let us know. And you can enter as many times as you want for or one entry for each show. Right? We'll be back at 3 p.m. With KCR and Bremerton Housing Authority. We hope that you will become a community ambassador and get out there and start pulling people onto yourself, and then creating a group. Again, I'll put out the information shortly on the next pancake breakfast. It's not called pancake breakfast event coming up every fourth Wednesday, which is very exciting. So again, more free food. And then as we get closer, we will share the information about the first block party.
Yep. Also, BK, this is every Wednesday, Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces, every Wednesday at noon.
Yep, absolutely. So Mark and I will see you next Wednesday at 12, and I'll be back here in 2 hours. So we will see you soon.